I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're uncovering the heart-wrenching journey of John Siko. He has written a powerful book. It is called Anatomy of a Wrongful Death Lawsuit. This powerful narrative follows John's relentless pursuit of justice after a healthcare provider's negligence led to his wife's tragic death. Join us as we delve into the intricacies of Florida's legal system and the fight against systemic failures in healthcare. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his powerful book. The links are below this interview. John, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start out by giving the folks at home an overview of what happened to your wife and what the doctor did wrong.
Well, it all started when the emergency room discharged her from the hospital with a broken leg because their x-rays did not detect a stable fracture of her tibia. So when she got home and put weight on that leg, the stable fracture became an inoperable, shattered tibia and fibia. So the only corrective factor was they would have to let the bones grow back naturally, 16 weeks or more. So she was put into a cast, not like a brace, and was transferred to a rehab facility. Well, immediately as she arrived at the rehab facility, they inserted a catheter, which is against all of the medical, the dangers of a catheter or such. And Medicare says you will not put a catheter in unless it's medically necessary. Well, they installed the catheter, and as expected, within 5 days, she came down with a bad urinary tract infection. The infection kept getting worse and worse, and they finally called it a non-treatable, drug-resistant UTI. But they left the catheter still remained in her. So I took her to her urologist, and he said, there's no reason for this woman to have a catheter in. He says, I know why the catheter was inserted. It was inserted to reduce the workload on the aides, so they would not have to change her diapers or help her to the bathroom. So rather than justifying the catheter by doing a bladder scan, they used economics rather than medical necessity to install the catheter. Well, basically, in the nursing home also, I told them that my wife is dehydrated and she needs to be rehydrated. And they said, well, we'll take care of this. A week later, I got a call from them telling me they found my wife non-responsive. So basically, she was dead. And at they transferred her immediately to the emergency room, where the doctors found her severely dehydrated and started aggressive rehydration. They also found out she had a UTI, she had pneumonia, and they questioned the need for having the catheter in the first place. So after 4 days, when they finally got her hydrated and she could be released, but the nursing home she just came from said they couldn't take her back because they had no beds. Well, basically, we checked the census that they had 4 Medicare beds available. But this is what AARP calls resident eviction. The AARP says that basically my wife had used up her 60 days of paid Medicare PT. And so now the thing to do is she is no longer giving him 60 days of paid PT to bring in a new patient, somebody who still has the 60 days left, and they could start all over again. So again, it becomes an economic decision, not a medical decision. So after 2 days, I did finally find another home. And shortly after she was there, they immediately removed the catheter. It had been in for 83 days. So from there on, I had 2 possible medical malpractices, one against a doctor and one against a nursing home. So I started the search for an attorney to take it. But as soon as they found out who the defendant was, everybody turned it down. And the reason they turned it down is because of Florida's sovereign immunity statutes. And to give you an example, if you should go to the hospital to have your left kidney removed and they remove your right one by mistake and you die, the total liability under legislation is $200,000. And to make it even more difficult for you to find a lawyer to prosecute, they limit the lawyer to only 25% contingency. And so no legal firm will take this. I mean, they can't spend 4 years of fighting with a deep pockets defendant and knowing that the return on their investment and their time is just not worth it.
Yeah.
So I finally did find an attorney 200 miles away and basically said the only way they would take the case is if I waived the 25% contingency and grant them a 40% contingency. Well, I really have no other choice but to do that. So I retained them. When my wife was relieved from the rehab finally, she continued to have difficulty walking and also continued to have UTIs. In fact, the last 2 years of her life, she had 25 UTIs, 12 of them which put her in the hospital. The last ones, they finally had to put her back into a nursing home. And she was then transferred to one of the defendant's hospitals where she was declared to have a 5th stage kidney failure. And she was transferred to a hospice where she survived 10 days of excellent care. I can't speak enough about hospice. And she finally died there of kidney failure, 23 days short of our 60th wedding anniversary. Oh. So then at the end of when she died, the nurses returned all the rings to me in a little plastic bag. And so I kept them for a while and finally sent them off to New York to a diamond auction. And this is a $4,700 3/4 diamond wedding ring. And they returned it to me and told me it was a fake. I says, what? And it appears that in the last nursing home she was in, they take their rings off to bathe them. And in one of these times, they swapped a $4,700 ring for a $20 fake, knowing that an 82-year-old dying woman would not know the difference. So basically, there's some aide walking around with a $4,700 diamond ring on. From there on, now we go through all of the motions of dismissal and everything else that goes into it. We decided that the doctor case was not viable because it was subjective. But the nursing home case was a slam dunk. I mean, because we had the Medicare directives, which they ignored. And so we were ready to prosecute that. But then my wife died. And what people don't know, you'd think that, okay, a medical malpractice case, if the plaintiff dies, boy, you really have a case on your hands. But it doesn't work that way. When I had the medical malpractice case, we had a slam dunk. But as soon as she died, it became a wrongful death suit. And under a wrongful death suit, it now is my obligation that I have to prove without a shadow of a doubt that it was the medical malpractice that killed her. A task you can't do unless short of an autopsy. So at this point, the defendant knows I don't have a case because we know it also. So at that point, after 2 years, if they would have made an offer, we probably would have accepted it. But the problem is that defendant's attorney is on a retainer at $25 to $125 an hour. And so rather than settle the case in 2 years, if he can slow walk it to 4 years, would be like killing the goose that was laying his golden egg.
Right.
And so what happens is they continue to drag it out, slow walk it. But yet my attorney has the same expenses, and he's on a retainer or on a contingency, while the defendant's attorney is on a retainer. So it runs on and on and on. Then I get a letter from Medicare telling me that I owe them $55,000. I couldn't understand it. What it was is that Medicare says that while your wife was being treated during your lawsuit, we paid the defendant $55,000 for medical expenses. Not me. They paid the defendant $55,000. But then they expect me to collect the $55,000 in the suit against the defendant. But I tried to explain to them that the defendant is immune. The defendant only had the $200,000 liability, and they're immune from the $55,000. So if I need to retain or return the money to Medicare, it would have to come out of any award I got. So at this point, I finally convinced them that this is not an ordinary lawsuit. This is a sovereign immunity lawsuit. And explained to them the defendant being exempt from having to pay this. So for the first time ever, because it's the first time anybody has ever really disputed this, they waived my claim. And they said, okay, that since it is a sovereign immunity case, the $55,000 will let it go away. So next comes that, I'm going to cut this short, is that since the case we knew it would never go to trial because the defendant could not afford it to go to trial because of the publicity that would have been associated with it. And so what the courts decide, they say, okay, you have to settle this in mediation, not through by going to court. Well, mediation is where two parties get together and they're supposed to come up with a settlement that's agreeable to both. But the problem is in mediation in a sovereign immunity, it's strictly against the plaintiff, because the defendant goes in there knowing that $200,000 is the maximum they can possibly lose.
God.
And their full purpose of is to reduce that money as far as you possibly can. And the plaintiff knows that, they're at a loss. They can't go over 200,000. They're the limit to it. So now you have a mediator in there who was paid at $600 an hour at a 3-hour minimum. And so what you do now is naturally we start off asking for 200,000 and they come back with a counter of 1,000. So for the next 3 hours, this $600 Aaron, all his job is to take our proposal to their room and bring their proposal back. This went on for 3 hours. And at that point, we did get a settlement. And I can't tell you what the settlement was. That is the confidentiality portion of it. But the settlement, the problem is for the defendant, the settlement is a cost of doing business. I mean, it's built into they know they're going to lose cases.
Right.
But what I did get what I attempted to do is to get them to admit to being guilty of a wrongful death.
Right.
The amount of money, and that's absolutely nothing. But the problem again is, since it was settled in mediation, the public will never know that they settled a wrongful death suit. So if you ever go back and look up the nursing home, there'll be no record in there that they had settled a wrongful death suit. So, and also the fact is, since, they settled, we still don't know today whether the nursing home is still doing the same practice of inserting a catheter, because there's been no exposure to anybody to get them to change.
Amazing. John, the whole story is amazing. The whole story is heartbreaking. The fact that your wife went in, a healthy person who had broken her leg, and then by a cascade of errors, her health declined, and people looking for shortcuts, people looking for the easy way. And then you get dragged through this legal system that's supposedly a justice system that provides little or no justice. It's heartbreaking for sure. Your story is a powerful one. You did get the nursing home to admit they made an error, that there was malpractice, so you have that. But it's tough. It's tough, and people are getting rich off this. These lawyers are getting rich, for the defendant. And it's a tragic story, no doubt. John Siko has written a powerful book. It is called Anatomy of a Wrongful Death Lawsuit. It follows John's relentless pursuit of justice after a healthcare provider's negligence led to his wife's death. It's an unbelievable journey. John was a relentless fighter, and he did get some justice at the end. John, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.